Good evening. The Toronto Police Services Board has just unanimously passed 81 recommendations meant to tackle anti-black racism in the service. The board held a virtual meeting today discussing the recommendations, including expanding the mobile crisis team, training for systemic racism, and equipping officers with body cameras. However, critics of the proposal say it doesn't go far enough to address systemic racism.
Until the Toronto Police Service looks at what is wrong, corrupt, and unsatisfactory in their engagement with Black communities in the city, all reports and subsequent recommendations become useless. We also recommend that you fully implement and monitor the race-based data collection policy in its entirety. But we also challenge you to do the actual work of reform, which is to acknowledge, disrupt, overturn, and eliminate anti-Black racism and all oppressive practices currently being upheld by the service.
Many deputants demanded greater police budget transparency, including a line-by-line breakdown of spending made publicly accessible on the service's website. The board also heard repeated calls to defund the police by as much as 50%. Right now, the service's budget sits at $1.2 billion. However, the board says it can't impose arbitrary cuts.
Statement is repeated so many times that it appears to the reader like the board's hands were tied by the Police Services Act, that they couldn't promise to defund the police even if they wanted to, or even if it would make for a safer Toronto.
Another hot topic was alternatives to community safety. The report calls for expanding the police service's current mobile crisis intervention team, which is the only existing alternative to a police-only response. Right now, that team only responds to about 20% of the approximately 30,000 crisis calls received every year. Each MCIT team consists of a mental health nurse and a specially trained police officer, something some deputants had a big problem with.
While I'm glad that you acknowledge the need for responders other than armed officers, this plan still involves sending an officer to accompany a mental health nurse. Police officers cost a whole lot more money and obviously have done more harm than good in many of the reports you have heard about, including the case of Regis Korchinski-Paquette. We need to be diverting this money towards services that support and protect the Black community. Police officers obviously aren't one of those services.
The report says it will take time to develop an alternative response team. Until then, the only response available is the MCIT and the police. The city also says you'll be seeing changes in coming weeks rather than months. For example, they've already posted the 2020 operating budget on the service's website.